Another day, another mystery. For decades, I was a city detective, trained to find the ugly truth in every case. My world was built on cold, hard facts, not ghosts or curses. After all that time, I learned that if something seems impossible, it's just a trick you haven't figured out yet. Now that I am retired, I am taking on a new kind of case, the ones people blame on the paranormal. They see phantoms, but I look for facts, because where people see the supernatural, I always find a truth far more chilling. This next case took me to a place that felt utterly cut off from the rest of the world, a small, forgotten town nestled in a remote valley. They were calling it a mass forgetting, a town that forgot its own name. I called it a damn good mystery, waiting to be solved. The call came in from a frantic doctor, a general practitioner from a remote, isolated town tucked away in a deep, forested valley. His voice, usually calm and professional, was laced with a palpable terror. "Detective," he pleaded, "something is terribly wrong here. People, they ray losing their minds. They ray forgetting things, everything. This town, it's forgetting itself." The town, a quaint little settlement known only by its local creek-s name, was indeed isolated, accessible by only one winding, often muddy road. It had a long history of self-sufficiency, its people proud of their deep roots and close-knit community. But lately, a chilling affliction had begun to spread. Residents were suffering from a strange, collective amnesia. It started small, forgetting where they left their keys or a neighbor's name. But it quickly escalated. People were forgetting basic facts about their own lives, their children's names, how to perform simple tasks. They'd wander out of their homes, utterly disoriented, unable to recall their address. It was a terrifying descent into mental fog. The locals, steeped in the area's ancient folklore, were quick to attribute it to the supernatural. They spoke of an old, forgotten curse placed upon the valley by a vengeful spirit, angered by some past transgression. Some pointed to a specific, gnarled ancient tree at the edge of the woods, revered and feared for centuries, claiming it was the source of the malevolent influence, slowly draining the town as collective memory. Panic was rampant. Families were desperately trying to hold onto each other, reminding loved ones of their own names, only to see the information slip away like sand through fingers. It was utter chaos. I drove out there, leaving behind the reliable network of modern life for a place where phone signals were weak and common sense seemed weaker. The air in the valley was heavy, still, almost oppressive. I listened to the doctor's desperate account, to the terrified, confused residents who could barely string a coherent sentence together. I heard the whispers of ancient curses, the fearful glances cast towards the gnarled tree. I nodded, took it all in, but my mind was already dissecting the impossible. A town doesn't just spontaneously forget itself. There had to be a trigger, a physical cause. I wasn't looking for spirits. I was looking for toxins. My first instinct was to check for a biological agent, a virus, something airborne. But the symptoms didn't quite fit typical neurological diseases. This was a profound, almost selective amnesia, not a general cognitive decline. I started with the basics: food, water, air. The town had its own well, drew water from a local spring, and relied on locally grown produce. I gathered water samples from the town well, from the spring, and from various homes. I collected soil samples from gardens and fields, air samples from different parts of the town, even samples of local vegetation. And I paid particular attention to any unusual environmental features. That's when I noticed a faint, almost metallic taste in the air, especially near the older, western side of town, where the worst cases of amnesia seemed to originate. And there was a subtle, almost imperceptible sheen on the surface of some stagnant puddles in low-lying areas, particularly after a rain. It was like an iridescent film. I sent the samples off to a specialized lab, pulling every string I had to get them fast-tracked. While I waited for the results, I delved into the town's geological and industrial history. It was an old mining town, I learned, but the mines had shut down decades ago, abandoned and forgotten. The maps showed several old, unsealed mine shafts and tunnels riddling the hillsides around the valley. The lab results came back, and they were startling, confirming my suspicions. The water samples from the well and some puddles showed elevated levels of heavy metals, specifically manganese and thallium, far exceeding safe limits. The air samples, particularly from the western side of town, contained trace amounts of specific airborne toxins, volatile organic compounds, and even microscopic spores of a peculiar neurotoxic fungus. The iridescent sheen on the puddles was indeed a telltale sign of metal leaching. Now, the whole terrifying picture snapped into focus. No ancient curse, no vengeful spirits from a gnarled tree. This was a slow, insidious poisoning, a tragic, utterly unlucky confluence of geology, neglect, and unusual environmental conditions. Here's what happened, plain as day. The old, abandoned mining tunnels riddling the surrounding hillsides were slowly but surely leaching heavy metals, manganese and thallium, both potent neurotoxins, into the groundwater system. The town as well, drawing from this contaminated aquifer, was delivering a steady, low-dose poison directly to its inhabitants. These metals, over time, would accumulate in the brain, causing neurological damage consistent with memory loss and disorientation. Compounding this was the unique microclimate of the valley. Due to its isolated, sheltered nature and specific geological formations, it created ideal conditions for the growth of a peculiar, neurotoxic fungus. This fungus, likely growing in the damp, undisturbed confines of the abandoned mines and then releasing its microscopic spores into the air, particularly when wind currents were low and humidity was high, added another layer of cognitive impairment. The very air they breathed, especially in the low-lying areas and older parts of town, was slowly poisoning them. The initial stages of forgetfulness were just the early symptoms of this slow-acting, cumulative poisoning. The residents, already prone to believing in folklore due to their isolation and history, naturally attributed these terrifying symptoms to the curse of the ancient tree or a vengeful spirit. The fear itself, the stress, would have exacerbated their cognitive decline, creating a feedback loop where panic intensified the perceived symptoms, and the symptoms fueled the panic. The fact that the disease spread slowly affected individuals at different rates depending on their exposure, e.g., those who drank more well water or spent more time in the western part of town and mimicked a gradual descent into dementia, only served to obscure the real cause and reinforce the belief in a supernatural affliction. It was a chilling example of how easily natural, unseen environmental factors can mimic the most terrifying supernatural tales, turning a thriving community into a living ghost town, lost in a fog of its own making. The curse was just the slow, silent poison beneath their feet and in the air they breathed. So, there you have it, the case of the town that forgot its name. No vengeful spirits, no ancient curses haunting the valley. Just a grim testament to the silent, insidious power of unseen environmental factors and the tragic vulnerability of human physiology. This one, it still gets to me. It wasn't about human malevolence, not directly. It was about an insidious, invisible threat, a slow creeping horror that turned a vibrant community into a shell of its former self. These people weren't attacked by some phantom. They were simply living in a place that, due to its unique geology and forgotten history, was slowly poisoning them. Their belief in an ancient curse was a desperate attempt to make sense of something incomprehensible, something utterly beyond their control. It has a chilling thought, isn't it, that the ground beneath our feet, the very air we breathe, can hold secrets far more terrifying than any ghost story. That the curse can be a confluence of heavy metals and microscopic fungi, silently eroding your mind, stripping away your very identity. It relies on our natural human tendency to look for grand, dramatic explanations for mysterious ailments, rather than the subtle, slow, often mundane truths of environmental hazards. For me, this case was a profound reminder of the delicate balance between humanity and its environment. It cemented the idea that sometimes the most dangerous monsters aren't the ones with teeth and claws, or even cunning plans. They raid the unseen, the unheard, the things that slowly erode us from the inside out, turning our own bodies and minds against us. And when you factor in our innate tendency to seek mystical explanations for what we can't immediately understand, you've got a recipe for genuine, widespread terror. So, the next time you hear a wild tale of a place cursed by the land, or people afflicted by a strange melody, pause. Don't jump to conclusions, no matter how thrilling or terrifying they might seem. Look for the small details, the subtle taste in the water, the unusual sheen on a puddle, the geological history of the area, because often the true horror isn't some ancient spirit, it is the very real, very physical threats that our environment can pose, especially when ignored or misunderstood. Until next time, stay curious, but always check your water.